A to Z Mysteries, Super Edition 2, Mayflower Treasure Hunt by Ron Roy. Chapter 4. Dink found Josh and Ruth Rose standing at the railing. Below them, the sea rolled beneath the boat. Seaweed clumps drifted by, and one passenger pointed at some jumping fish. The sun glistened off their silvery scales. Josh wouldn't share his M&Ms with the seagulls, Ruth Rose teased. Dink laughed and took a deep breath of the cold air. It smelled of salt and something sweet. Soon land came into view, and the ferry began to slow. "Won't it be awesome if we find those stolen jewels?" Josh asked. "What's really awesome is that the Mayflower sailed right where we are, almost 400 years ago," Ruth Rose said. "Think how happy those people must have been to see land." Straight ahead, the kids could see trees and buildings come into view. Then red and green buoys appeared. The ferry kept to the left of the red buoys all the way to the long pier. Passengers began walking toward the stairs that would take them off the boat. As the kids followed, Dink kept his eyes open for the old woman with the mole on her face. He didn't spot her, but he wasn't surprised. There were dozens of other people in the line leaving the boat. Once they were on solid ground again, Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose walked along the pier. They started following a small sign that pointed toward the center of Provincetown. "Wait a minute, guys," Ruth Rose said. She was pulling her guidebook from the pouch in her sweatshirt. She read for a minute. "Okay, this says there's a place called First Encounter Beach. It's where the Pilgrims first landed and where they first saw Indians." "So where is this beach?" Josh asked. Ruth Rose turned her guidebook so Dink and Josh could see the map. "I think we take a right off the pier," she said. "See, that doesn't look too far." Ruth Rose was right. 5 minutes of fast walking brought them to a wind-swept beach. A plaque on a boulder said, "First Encounter Beach." "The Mayflower wouldn't have been able to land here," Dink said, remembering what he'd read in school. "They anchored pretty far out and used smaller boats to get to land." Josh unfolded the sketch he'd made in the Pilgrim Hall Museum. The shoreline in that drawing looked nothing like the one stretching in front of them. "So where do we start?" he asked. Ruth Rose looked at Josh's drawing. "Trees and shorelines could change a lot in 400 years, she said. "But that tall rock might still be here somewhere." "I don't see any rocks," Dink said, "let alone one that looks like an eagle." The 3 kids turned in a circle, trying to spot a tall, pointy rock. They saw a few trees that looked really old, and some beach cottages. One man was scraping the bottom of a rowboat in his yard. "Let's ask him," Ruth Rose suggested. The kids walked over and told the man what they were looking for. He glanced at Josh's sketch. "Nope, nothing like that around here," he said. "I've been here 30 years and never seen a rock like that." Dink had an idea. "Do you know where the Pilgrims came ashore?" he asked. "Was it really here on this beach?" The man pointed 100 yards to the left. "The Provincetown Historical Society says they landed over there where that small grove of pine trees grows right up to the water's edge," he said. They thanked the man and hiked toward the pine trees. The spot was silent, except for the whisper of a breeze blowing through pine needles. A few seagulls floated overhead. Dink felt strange, realizing he might be standing where pilgrims had once walked. "Okay, so if you're that Mudget guy and you land here, what do you do next?" Josh asked. "You wouldn't be alone," Ruth Rose said, reading from her guidebook. There'd be other crew members in the boat and some passengers. It says kids came ashore to get exercise, and women came to wash clothes. Mudgett would want to find a private place to hide the jewels, Dink added. Somehow he must have found the rock we saw in the picture. But there is no rock, Josh said, looking disappointed. Maybe it's underwater now, Ruth Rose said. Maybe the beach that was here got covered up. Oh, great, Josh said. We have to find a rock under the ocean. I've never read anything that says the beach where they landed is underwater now, Dink said. I haven't either, Ruth Rose said. If Mudgett really had the jewels with him, he'd want to go as far away from other people as he could. So maybe he found the rock further away from the shore. But the drawing shows the rock near the beach, Josh said, pointing to his own sketch. There are some more cottages on the other side of that little bridge, Ruth Rose said. Maybe someone knows about the rock. The kids checked over the bridge and walked up to the first house they came to. A woman opened the door. Yes, she said. Josh showed her his sketch. We're trying to find this rock, he said. The woman took a close look at the sketch. Then she shook her head. I don't remember ever seeing anything like this, she said. Sorry, kids. The door swung shut, and the kids started to walk away. Hey, I just thought of something, the woman said, opening the door again. She pointed toward a tall bare tree. There's a little park there. It's called a rock park. There are a few big boulders, but nothing tall and pointy like the one you showed me. Anyway, good luck. The kids hurried toward the tall tree. Beneath it, they found a couple of benches and a set of swings. There was a sandy place near a row of flat rocks partly buried in the sand. Dink saw a plastic pail and a little shovel under one of the benches. The whole area was surrounded by boulders as tall as Ruth Rose. Well, unless the rock shrank over the years, it isn't here, Josh said. Dink noticed something shiny on one of the boulders. He walked over to see what it was. Hey guys, check this out, he said, kneeling to read a brass plate. Welcome to Rock Park. It is believed that some of the Mayflower passengers passed through here as they explored this area of Provincetown in November 1620. There were more boulders then. The row of 5 flat rocks behind you was once a single monolith that stood 20 feet tall. Years ago, the rock toppled and broke into sections during a hurricane. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose whipped around to look at the flat rocks that had once been a tall rock. A few people were walking near the park. Dink wondered if they had come on the ferry. Dink noticed someone sitting on one of the benches. She was hunched over with a long shawl covering her head and most of her face. It was the same old woman he had seen on the ferry. You see that woman? Dink whispered to Josh and Ruth Rose. What about her? Josh said. I think she's following us, Dink said. She was watching me on the ferry too. Maybe she's just following the trail of the pilgrims like we are, Ruth Rose said. She looks like she's sleeping. How did she get here so fast? Dink said, keeping his voice low. 1 minute, that bench was empty, and then she appeared out of nowhere. Dink, a lot of the people on the ferry were probably coming here, Ruth Rose said. Maybe that woman wanted to see the place where the pilgrims landed. Yeah, I guess you're right, Dink said. You know, if this was a tall rock before it fell over, one of these 5 pieces must have been the pointy top, Josh said, like in my drawing. The kids looked at the 5 flat rocks. They were all in a row. A few inches of each rock was exposed above the sand. If the rock fell over straight, the top part should be one of the two end ones, Ruth Rose said. Maybe there was a hole in the top of the rock, and that's why Mudget hid the jewels there. You're right, Ruth Rose, Josh said. So let's dig around the two end pieces first. He dropped to his knees and started scraping sand away from the flat rocks. Dink and Ruth Rose joined him. Dink grabbed the plastic pail and shovel. The old woman was still on the bench. Her chin was on her chest, and she was snoring quietly. Dink handed the shovel to Ruth Rose and the pail to Josh. I'll try to find something else to dig with, he said. He walked toward the tall tree and found a dead branch. One end was sharp and flat, perfect for scooping sand. Josh was examining his sketch again. Which of these two-end rocks seems to have a pointy end? He asked. That should be the top, the eagle's mouth. I can't tell yet, Ruth Rose said. She was 20 feet away from Josh, tossing sand out of a hole she dug at the very end of the rock. The kids dug as the afternoon grew colder and the sun disappeared behind some clouds. Dink checked his watch. We have to be on the 4 o'clock ferry no matter what, he said. It's 3:15 now. They dug faster and faster. Piles of sand grew around their knees. They uncovered all sorts of things that had gotten left behind over the years. Empty bottles, a button, part of a comic book. Guys, my rock is getting narrow. I think it has a pointy end, Ruth Rose said. The boys scrambled over to where she was digging. Ruth Rose had exposed about 2 feet more of the rock. They all helped her dig until the entire end was visible. It did taper to a kind of point, but they couldn't find a hole where anyone might have hidden something. It was impossible to tell if this part of the rock was the same as the eagle's mouth in Josh's sketch, or if this had been at the very top of the rock when it was still standing. Dink felt disappointed. He'd begun to get excited about solving this 400-year-old mystery. Maybe someone else had found the stolen jewels years ago. Heck, some squirrel could have carried them off. Let's dig this whole area up, he said. There might be another section of rock that's buried. Their 2-foot hole became 3 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Dink's fingers were sore, and one of his knuckles was bleeding. Yuck, Josh yelled suddenly, falling back on his knees. I found a dead animal. Dink looked at what had made Josh's face turn white. It was about the size of a hamster and covered with rotted brown skin. Dink used his stick to lift the thing out of the hole. The brown skin fell apart. Oh my gosh, Ruth Rose yelled. It wasn't an animal skin at all. It was a decayed leather bag. As it fell away, something still hung from Dink's stick. It was a necklace.